Here I've got the Pro-800 from Sequential. It was originally released in 1982 and it's been getting a bad press ever since. And why is that? I think it's mainly because the chip inside, the original chip, was pushed to its limits, especially with the envelopes. The envelopes were a bit sloppy. People thought they were slow. They weren't actually slow, but what you got was things just died off at the very end and you didn't get very fine control over everything. You didn't get very fine control over any of the knobs actually, and just when you're twisting a knob, you just seem to wait a little while before anything happens. This has got the GliGli upgrade in it. It's a really simple thing to do. It's $149 and it upgrades the synth to a modern synth. You can control all the parameters via MIDI, so you can use an iPad app, or there's a controller panel for your DAW, which is great because it means you can automate any of your tweaks live. You can't send the MIDI, but you can receive it. So it was seen as a poor man's Pro-800, maybe justifiably so. It wasn't as good as the Pro-800, but it was a lot cheaper and it sounds pretty similar. It uses 3340 chips, so we've got the same sort of heritage, the same sort of sound, but it just doesn't feel quite as nice to use. We've gained a few things, a basic sequencer and an arpeggiator, plus we've got an extra shape on oscillator A, but we've lost a couple of things as well. We've lost the pulse width for the polymod. We've also got a blend rather than individual mixers, and we don't have noise. But other than that, it's very similar. We don't have the extra section for the mod wheel, for example, but you know, for the price, it was a great synth, but it did come just before the DX7 and the death of analogs. So people didn't really like it, but as I say, unjustifiable because it does sound really good. I've had a play with taking the GliGli out and putting the old chip back in, but the envelope doesn't work properly, and I'm not sure if the chip's broken or if it's the firmware update I've got on this. The EEPROM says version 4 from 1983, so I've ordered a version 8 original software from Sequential on this EEPROM chip you can buy from Germany for about £20, so we'll see how that works. But I wasn't a fan of the GliGli when I first got it because it just felt a little bit laggy as well. When we put it into GliGli mode, for example, so I'm now editing stuff in GliGli when I press to tape. There's loads of little things we can do on this with various pushes of these buttons here. We've got different LFO shapes. We can assign this to A and B or A and B. We've got a slow or a fast LFO speed. We've got different envelope shapes. Just show that quickly maybe. That's fast on an exponential curve. Fast on a linear. Slow on a linear. Slow exponential. And slow linear. So the slow exponential is not bad actually. If you put it onto linear, we can hear it just drop out at the end, it just disappears. You can hear that just stopping. And that's more like the original chip actually. Put it back onto exponential. It's okay. Or is it? It's not bad actually. Yeah, that's okay, isn't it? But it's not as smooth as others. And I think that's the big thing with this. But it's not that bad. You don't really notice it in a mix. I'm not going to go through everything on this. I'm not going to do a GliGli tutorial. What else have we got that's really useful on this? 8 and 8, which is the way this detunes. If I just play oscillator A. Octaves. Semitones. Or free. What's even nicer, I suppose, is that we've got unison detune. If I just go back into this. And that's a lovely little upgrade. We've also got velocity sensitivity. If you bring in another keyboard, you can use velocity sensitivity for either the filter or the amplitude. So a really good upgrade actually. The more I play with the GliGli, the more I like it over the original. But I just don't like digging into this. Everything's accessed via this, and then you change the parameters using that. So if we go 1, that's the LFO shape. Let's just modulate the pitch of oscillator A. So there's a few more shapes than just the triangle and the square. But I like using it in its rawest form if I can. It's a nice simple synth and very hands-on, so try and ignore that as much as I can. It changes the way you use the filter envelope, the envelope amount and the fine tuning. Then I go negative and positive, so frequency of oscillator B, for example. Negative or positive, and then we've got the envelope over here, so we can do stuff like this. So when you get your old patches up, they're all a little bit ski-whiff. It also changes the glide into the volume of oscillator B. You can hear there's a little bit of a lag. And sometimes when you're doing things more complex, maybe with the sequencer, these just take so long to actually react. Sometimes you think it's not working properly. I'll try that. Doesn't seem to be any worse there. Let's try a couple of others. So it is still a little bit laggy. But once you realise that's what's happening, it actually doesn't become an issue anymore. And let's not forget, it's got two oscillators. It's got the polymod section. We've got FM on this, so it completely blows out the water from that sort of perspective, the 106 or the Poly 6. But sound-wise, what have we got? What does it do? Obviously we've got the two oscillators and they've both got the same wave shapes. We've got the sawtooth, triangle, and the square, or the pulse. You can hear a little bit of steppiness there, can't you? So loads of different wave shapes you can make on that, the same as you can on the Pro 1 and the Prophet 5. This stepping disappears once you use the LFO. And compared with something like the Prophet 5, oscillator B is a bit more of a simple affair. We can't detach it from the keyboard. We don't have a low frequency mode, but we do have the fine tune. So turning it up with the GliGli with the glide knob. And these apparently put the filter into overdrive, or the overdrive the filter over 50%, which you can't do on the original version either. Let's put that into semitone mode or octave mode, shall we? 8, 8. Semitone. So I've lost the independent use of the glide knob, but we access it on this dreaded panel. Go into 7, glide. and this is polyphonic glide. So very nice, but I don't really mind losing the glide on there. It's not something I use all the time. It's something that you sort of pre-program into things rather than changing it on the fly. I'd rather be changing the actual amount of each of the oscillators in the mix. So I quite like that. And while I'm playing chords, actually, unison mode, but if we play a chord and put it into unison mode, but this is slightly detuned, obviously, because I had the detune on earlier. If I go back to detune, turn that down to 0. And that was on the original as well, I think. It's not a GliGli upgrade. So the oscillator section is really quite powerful on this, considering it's in the same price bracket as a Poly 6 or a 106. You know, you're getting the two oscillators here. You've got sync, you've got unison mode, you've got the unison detune, you've got the chord mode. I'm really impressed by it. So let's move over to the filter. Nothing too exciting on the filter. Quite nice sounding. And we don't lose any bass when we bring the resonance in. So like I said earlier, the envelope amount is actually negative or positive on this, so. Envelopes, again, a little bit weird. I could go in and change the settings on this. Again, we've got the fast and the slow linear and the fast and the slow exponential. Slightly different to the original though. On the original, the envelope amount and the sustain was sort of interlinked, a bit like they are on the Prophet 5. On this, it's much more like you'd expect. And we can track that as well. For your 3 oscillator organ tones. So it really has got a bit of dirt in there, hasn't it? Really nice actually, isn't it? Let's try and see how snappy we can get these. Let's see if it's on fast. So we go into tape, amp shape, filter shape, fast exponential. So that's pretty fast, isn't it? Just a shame it hasn't got noise. There is a noise mod you can do for it. And this version of GliGli I've got, I think it's 2.29, has the ability to bring noise in as well. You can faff around over here somewhere and do it, but if you want noise, get a Prophet 5. Let's try it on slow. Slow linear. Pretty slow, isn't it? It's coming. I'm not going to wait for that, but you can hear, you can get really slow envelopes as well. Okay, that does the filter section, I think. Should we take a look over here at the poly mod? So go to from tape, I press 0, 0, and now I've got my basic sawtooth patch. Again, I think that's one of the more recent updates on the GliGli. Let's modulate A with B. All doing everything you'd expect. Yeah, sounds like a dirty old analog synth, doesn't it? Sort of stuff you just can't get from a 106 or a Poly 6. So this is a really cool, really underrated synth, and I know I've just ran through it quickly, sort of talking about the GliGli versus the original and trying to give you an overall impression of what it actually does. But I've got coming up a couple of tracks that I've made using just this and some drums, obviously, that I've put on a sounds only demo previously to give an idea of what it can actually do, because once I started playing with it and making sounds with it, I just ended up writing a couple of little tracks. So hopefully you enjoy those, and hopefully it demonstrates exactly what you can do with this. I think they both have, both the tracks coming up have a really nice old school sort of sound to them. They really do sound like vintage, but without being sort of pure synthwave. So I hope that was of some use to somebody somewhere, and if it was, please think about subscribing. Maybe join me on my Patreon page. We've got hours and hours worth of tutorials helping you to get the most out of your synths, and it all really does help the channel. So I will see you next time, and stay tuned for the tunes.